Hardmans and the Joe Gordon, Sam Noto, who we've done on the show. We had a
Yeah,
beautiful interview with Sam.
yeah.
Nick Travis. You mentioned we were talking about influences. Nick Travis and my father got fired from Horace Heights band together.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they were late. They went
That
out
was
hanging out.
is that in Boston?
No, they were touring. My dad came from Boston, but they were touring the country. My dad's first band he was with when he got out of high school was Horace Height,
Oh,
and
okay,
then he
got
went with Jerry Wald,
okay.
and he ended up with Dorsey,
Mhm.
and he had his own band around Boston too. But he said, "Oh, Nick Travis," because I had a record with Zoot and stuff, and Nick Travis was on it. He said, "Oh, I knew Nick Travis." He said, "Nick was a great guy." He said, "The first time I smoked pot was with Nick Travis."
Wow. Love, man, man, this play. I love Nick Travis, man.
Yeah, there were some guy. I mean, the guy on the West Coast that he didn't mention, but a guy I love um, is Bobby Shue.
Oh yeah, yeah. I met him. I never studied with him, but I met Bobby at LaRue Brown's Watson's place. LaRue Brown is Clifford Brown's widow, and she was a big
Oh,
force in the LA scene. And they were very close, Bobby Shue and LaRue Brown.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I met Bobby Shue in Cork, Ireland, when he was there with Teddy Edwards, which is the only time I met Teddy Edwards doing a tribute to Clifford Brown. And it was Bobby Shue and Teddy Edwards and Red Mitchell, and I can't remember the rest of the band. But we became. I was there playing with an all-star group of what would you say? People from England, Scotland, and Ireland, the British Isles,
Mhm.
and I was their guest. And
Yeah.
it was this festival. But I ended up eating most of my meals with Bobby, Teddy, and Red, and it was just such a wonderful time. Bobby was a great cat. We had a wonderful, and of course they were doing a tribute to Clifford and Max.
Right.
So since Teddy had been on one of the original Clifford and Max records, Bobby was in the Clifford Brown role, and they were playing all Dahoud and Joy Spring and LaRue and all those Clifford Brown tunes.
Yeah.
I imagine that they were close. Is LaRue still with us?
No, no, LaRue passed about 20 years ago, I would think. Yes, I knew her pretty well. I think it's been a little while, but her let me see, her grandson, I mean Clifford Brown Jr. is around. Then there's another Clifford Brown. Clifford Brown Jr. is a DJ. And I think he's still in San Francisco. He has a son. I think it's Clifford Brown the third.
No, he's a
And
DJ in the old sense that we understand DJs as playing real records and that kind of thing, not just
I I
playing.
I, I think he's still a DJ in the San Francisco area, in the Bay Area.
Uh-huh.
I think it's K Soul. I'm not sure. It's been a long time, but he has a son also, which is Clifford Brown the third, and I'm not sure if he plays. But yeah. Anyway, I know that family. I knew LaRue more better than I knew. Um, Also, Clifford Brown has a nephew plays drums named Rayford Griffin. He plays more on the fusion side. That's Clifford's sister's son. He's a great drummer, Rayford Griffin, who I used to play with also, and I met him through LaRue Brown also.
Did she talk about Clifford much?
Yeah, yeah, she talked about him a lot. In
What
fact,
would
she
she
spoke.
what would she say about him? I mean,
Oh, you just okay. I mean, she told me how they met, and they met through Max Roach, and I guess LaRue was doing a dissertation about jazz music and how jazz was not a legitimate art form.
right.
And so anyway, Max said, "Man, Clifford, you need to spend some time with this lady to uh, introduce her to jazz and give her give
Edifier.
yeah, just make sure she knows jazz has the validity that it has. So anyway, that's to make a long story short. That's how they met through Max Roach. And she said that Clifford was like everybody said, was just beautiful guy. Um, uh, he was a great pianist. She showed me pictures of his of the wedding, but he played a lot of instruments, and he was a master mathematician. He was a great chess player. He was
I've
really
heard
good with
that.
numbers. Yeah, really good with numbers, and and a great father. And just like everybody, I hear a lot of interviews and people mention how great of a nice of a person he was. And yeah, she mentioned him a lot, and that's how they met through Max Roach, and
Nice,
he's an angel
it's a
from what
beautiful
I understand.
story.
And consummate practicer. He loved to practice. He loved Rafael Mendez a lot. This is all the information I got from Larue.
Well, there's
He,
that famous tape that I thought was quite amusing, where Clifford's practicing. He's playing Cherokee,
yeah.
and LaRue comes in and says, "Clifford, do you want such and such for dinner?" And I remember we got to pick up the laundry. Or see, I don't remember exactly what small talk it was. And he pauses and he talks to her. He says, "Oh yes, okay, sure." And then he continues practicing in the exact same spot of the Bridge of Cherokee that he was on.
Yes, I have that. I have that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really have to go through my CDs because I have that. It's called the Lost Tapes, and
Yeah, I would like to hear those too. Um, Now we see James's actual abode a little better. We see his poster, "We Live in Harlem," and a little something of Centro behind you there,
yeah,
and the Zoller digs, as we say.
yeah. My 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 Randy Brecker book.
Randy Brecker, Randy's a wonderful person, man,
Oh man,
and
just
a
like
great player. I mean, of course, that's to be said.
great writer, player, person. Him and his wife, good people, man. And yeah, he's one of the guys that as I grew up listening to in San Diego. In fact, I saw him live with the Mingus Dynasty Band with Mike Richmond, Clifford Jordan, Billy Hart. It was in the early '80s. But yeah, he's one of the guys I check out a lot.
Yeah, we've known each other for a very long time because Mike and I were so close. I met Randy. In fact, this book, this Bob Mover Thesaurus Lexicon,
Mhm.
that I wrote my book of patterns and ideas, Randy wrote the forward to that.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, and he's a very special person. Not as nice too. We did a nice one of these on the real side shows with them too, which was
Oh,
beautiful.
really? Okay, I'll make sure
Yeah,
I check it.
yeah. So anybody wants to check it out, if you go to @Bob Mover Jazzability, you can see the whole series of these wonderful dialogues, conversations, interviews, however you want to call them, encounters with all these wonderful musicians. And we're so privileged today to have James Zollar, great James Zollar, with us today. And, so we were discussing a number of things. And one thing we were going to talk about was we started to get into these. One thing that separates your playing, or makes it a little different from people, is that you have absorbed the better elements of a lot of different trumpet styles, or improvising styles from different trumpet players, and not just the three or four. Most trumpet players, you can say, "Oh yeah," you can hear them play, and you can take the solo part and say, "Oh, there's Miles, there's Clifford, there's Freddie, there's this," and you have developed your own style really, and I think partly because your influences are not, even though you've absorbed all the obviously great influences on the instrument, there's a lot of people that you were hip to that are outside of the box, outside of the norm.
Right.
And now Bill Hardman, for example.
Mhm.
Um, did you get to know Bill at all, or
Very little, but I got a chance to see him play a lot. We met we met once in New York, but I used to see him at the Catamaran where I met where you were playing with Chet Baker. He was there with Art Blakey.
oh,
It was
okay, yeah, I heard him with Art Blakey too.
it was in the '70s where kind of Bill was in and out. I remember that at that point. I think I saw Woody Shaw with the band too. But I first time I saw Bill Hartman live was with Art Blakey in the '70s at the Catamaran, and I never did. I met him once when I came to New York, but I more or less followed him. A lot of times I wouldn't say anything. I would just he knew my face, but I was kind of shy when it came to my mentors. Sometimes I wouldn't bother them. I would just show up and listen, you know.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of it there. I think that you know you there were some people I didn't approach, but I just like to listen to them a lot. I
Yeah,
heard Bud Johnson many times, and I just never could find myself. Well, he always was busy. There were other people he'd known for years around him, and
yeah,
I just
exactly.
felt I didn't want to be in the middle of that or interrupt them, but I'd observe everything, that I
Right.
could, and like several people like that. Other people, I was thinking, I just thought of somebody who was in New York. Yes, another person who's not as well known as he should be, but who always I thought was a wonderful player is Dizzy Reese.
Oh yeah, I'm very close. Yeah, I know him very well. Yeah, yeah. I spent a whole summer with him, uh,
Really?
just just hanging out in Berlin. We were me, him, and Charles Tolliver were doing a show called Porgy and Bess, not in the pit band, but as an on stage act. And that was all our thing. We had maybe 2 minutes on stage together. That was in the summer of 1988. So we got to spend. I got a chance to spend like almost every day with Dizzy for 2 months.
And what was this act? It was called Porgy. It was songs from Porgy and
It was,
Bess.
it was a show, Porgy and Bess, and it was a walk-on act where we would put on these marching uniforms and just march around the stage. I remember the song. I don't know the name of the song, but the song was beep 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 beep. Beep 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 beep. Anyway, that was the name. That was the song. I forget the name of the song, but me, him, and Charles Tolliver, we had, and Clark Gayton, we had a walk on part.
So
And
you went all the way to Europe to do this walk on for 3 minutes a night for 2 months or so. You said what was it?
actually, it went on for 3 months, but I had to leave to go on tour with Steve Coleman, and they sent Joe Gordon in to replace me. But that was
They said
back in
who? I'm sorry. They said who?
little Joe Gardner. We called him Joe
Joe
Gardner.
Gardner, right? I thought you said Joe Gordon. I said that would be
Yeah, yeah. We called him Joe Gardner. He
right.
replaced me, but I was there for a couple of months or a month and a half, and uh, and yeah, that was back in the day. I mean, they paid us a great salary just to hang, just to do those 2 minute walk on. The only stipulation is, I think the opening night we had to stay for the whole night. We had to stay the whole night, but then after this opening night, after we did our walk on part, we could go. We could leave the theater.
Oh wow.
So otherwise, I got a chance to really hang with Dizzy Reese and Charles Tolliver and Clark Gayton, um, like every day, just talking about music and in fact, they set up some recording sessions. Dizzy Reese and Charles set up a recording session next door at a place called the Quasimodo. And the play and the theater we were at was called the Theater des Westens, and it's
Now
right
this is
next
Berlin. You say?
Berlin.
Yeah.
Berlin, that's right. So yeah. So anyway, Dizzy Reese is one of those guys. Uh, he's an interesting trumpet player. I wanted to ask him for lessons. I actually did, but he's so esoteric. He just said, "No, just let's just hang out.
Yeah, that
Let's,
sounds like him.
yeah, because he's one of those guys. He's got a lot going on. He's a beautiful, beautiful technician and theoretician dealing with theory on the trumpet. Because I love his approach. It's very individual, and I always wanted to pick his brain, but he just wanted to just hang out, and just vibe.
Yeah, I have my own up and down personal relationship with him. Neither of us are the easiest person to always get along with, but I love the guy, and I certainly have like the deepest respect for his playing, and really found him. He's another guy. He doesn't sound like anybody else. He
Yeah,
really sounds like he has found his own voice, and you know, and uh, and he could swing and play ballads, and
yeah,
do all the beautiful things. And Charles Tolliver is another trumpet player I was going to ask you about. He's another one on that short list of musicians that should have gotten. I think what happens is in jazz education now, with everything have gone to the schools, they codify things down to where there's like just about 5 or 6 people on each instrument that they consider important. And so when they teach the 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 young people, these are teachers who didn't really have the kind of experience that you and I had.
right. Mhm.
The kind of thing. I mean, you talk about my experience. I mean, you were flattering me with the people I've gotten to know and this and that. But of course, as you and I get deeper into the conversation about your life, you say, "Oh yeah, incidentally, I had 3 weeks of hanging out every day with Dizzy Reese and Charles Tolliver.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was something I did." You take that as like just something you throw off to tell me about, as we talk. But when you really think about it, it's a kind of experience which I know that it is. That's a rare thing in life, and that most people that are teaching in universities and conservatories didn't have anything like that even once in their life. And so then they're saying, well, the most important trumpet players are, Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge. There is a lineage, and you're not taking anything away. Yeah, Dizzy, Miles, Clifford, those
right.
cats are in there. But then there are the iconoclasts who if I think if you're really serious about this music, you should know who these people are that we're talking about, and if you're a saxophone player, you should know who Ernie Henry was, who Warren Marsh,
Right. Thank
you
you.
know, who
Exactly. King Quail. Well, all the guys like that.
yeah,
Um,
and so Tolliver is still around. In fact, he just went up to Montreal, and my friend Charles Ellison. Do you know Charles at all? He's
I don't.
a beautiful cat, man. He's originally from Indianapolis, I believe, but he's been living in Montreal for almost half a century at Concordia University. He just retired, I think, but he brought Charles Tolliver up. He was the guy who brought Frank Foster up years ago when I decided to live in Canada. When my daughter Emily was born, I wanted to get out of New York. Charles got me a gig at the university, Concordia there,
Oh,
and
wow.
anyway, he Charles knows all these wonderful uh,
Charles Ellison.
Charles Ellison, yeah,
I look for him.
and why I mentioned him just now, I'm trying to think, but I mean, he's another one that plays beautifully too, and he knows all these cats. And
What
now,
instrument?
so go
What
ahead.
instrument does he play? Charles
He's a
Ellison.
trumpet player. He's a very good trumpet
Hey,
player. Yeah, and yeah, he just had Charles Tolliver up there. That's what I was mentioning that about. So he's still in good shape, Charles Tolliver. And I just remember him from the day. I never knew him very well either. He was another
yeah,
person that I saw around town, and I would be sitting at the bar with him sometimes at the Vanguard with Stanley Cowell, and because they were very tight.
yeah.
And he
They,
started the Strata East Company, and Stafford James was a good friend of mine. So, I mean, we met, but again, he wasn't somebody that I got to know. In fact, I should call him for this show. I get to know him that way. That's
he, he would love to do it. In fact, I did a recording. I'm on one of Charles's big band's record, one of his Blue Note, one of his last Blue Note big
Oh,
band records. But I'm sure he would love to do your show.
yeah. Well, maybe we'll talk later. Maybe give me his number and I'll talk to him.
Yeah.
That would be great. Other trumpet players we were talking about was now you're probably too young. I'm actually too young too. Joe Gordon
Yes.
was, I remember being 12 years old, maybe 11 or 12. That would have been 1963, 4, and buying one of my first copies of Downbeat and reading that this guy Joe Gordon had died in a fire,
Yeah.
living in an abandoned building
Hmm.
near L.A., I think.
Right. Mhm.
And it was just a funny one of those memories you have from childhood. I remembered, yeah, Joe Gordon. The first time I saw that name was reading this article that he had died in a fire, living in an abandoned building, and I didn't know anything about drug addiction then or anything like that. I was thinking I saw the names of people he played with. He played with Shelly Manne, and he was a protege of Dizzy's, and he was, the biography was, or actually um, the what do they call it when they put it not the eulogy but the memorial,
Mhm.
the little biography they had post death uh, was very illustrious. I was wondering how a guy like that
Yeah.
could pass like that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Joe Gordon was. He's one of those guys that. I mean, he even played with Charlie Parker.
yeah, he's on that thing in Boston and
Yeah.
holds his own.
Yeah, he sure does. Big
Yeah,
time. That's a
yeah, he
great
does.
Joe Gordon
And
record.
I like those things, the Shelly Manne records with Richie Kamuka
With
and
the
Victor
light.
Feldman
Yeah.
at the Black Hawk.
Blackhawk, excuse me. And Connie Condoli's on some of that stuff.
Right,
I
but the
think
stuff that he
Connie,
isn't on, Joe Gordon's on.
right, exactly.
There, there's different ones. And there's some with Charlie Mariano too that Richie's not on. There's another band.
Mhm.
But I mean that was Joe Gordon, and there's also some other Joe Gordon. And
He did a lot of stuff with. He did a few things with Art Blakey. He,
I don't know those.
oh yeah, yeah. There's some studio stuff he did with Art Blakey and Gigi Grice. Him and let me see, got it handy. Anyway, him and Gigi Grice were in the horn section with Art Blakey. They do My Ray. Let me see. I might have an accident trying to find it, but yeah, um, Joe Gordon did a few things with Art Blakey. In fact, Art Blakey's on Joe Gordon's first solo record. It's called Introducing Joe Gordon, and Art Blakey's on drums. And I knew Joe Gordon's widow. Her name was Irma Gordon, and
Oh,
uh, and she told me that Joe Gordon really liked uh, Roy Eldridge also. Yeah,
I imagine he did. Yeah, I mean he had that that kind of fire.
yeah, and
Um,
yeah, didn't you tell me your dad worked with Joe Gordon?
yeah, I think Joe Gordon played. My dad had a big band around Boston,
Hmm.
and when Billy Eckstein came to town, and they backed different artists that came in at a place called the Salisbury Beach Frolics.
Hmm.
My dad hired Joe. They also played at a club. Joe was in Sabby Lewis's band
Right. Hmm.
in Boston, and there was a club called Cappy's.
Right.
And
Okay.
Cappy's had Sabby Lewis's band and my father's band.
Hmm.
They played opposite each other.
Yeah.
So my dad had known Joe Gordon in
Right. I
in,
remember you
in
telling
that
me that
too.
story.
Yeah,
And also,
but he
Joe
got
Gordon
when
was.
when Billy Eckstein came to town, he got Joe Gordon and he got like Herb Pomeroy, those
Uh-huh.
the trumpet, and he got somebody else, and saxophones were like he got I think Hoots Musuli, and
Hmm. I've read
uh,
that.
was a great lead player and good jazz player too. And Sir Shaloff had been my dad's
Hmm.
bandmate on Ina Ray Hutton's band,
Hmm.
which was Ina Ray Hutton was famous for an all-girl orchestra, but
Right.
there were times when she had men in the band too. And one of those bands had my dad and Serge Shaloff.
Your dad was a trumpet player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Serge was a baritone player.
Mhm.
And we used to have sessions in my house in Swampscott when I was a little kid. And I have a vague recollection of somebody playing a very big saxophone in a wheelchair. And
Interesting.
and that was Serge. I think he came over one night to play and to hang out with my dad shortly before he died, probably. So I
Hmm.
don't know that. My dad said probably it happened. He said, yeah, he thinks that did happen, but I don't know. But yeah, that was my dad had a whole bunch of X-rated stories about Serge, but
Yeah.
we'll let those go.
I remember.
But
Also, I got to
yeah,
throw this in there.
Joe
Well,
Gordon was,
He
Boston.
worked with
Now
Horace
Roy,
Silver too. Just,
excuse me.
just he worked with Horace Silver also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's on a Horace Silver record too. Just
I
I
didn't
think
know
it's
that. I didn't know a Horace Silver record with him on it.
yeah. It's a
Oh,
really
okay.
really good record.
Now you listen. Did let's talk about even the older cats. I mean, you played Buck Clayton,
Hmm.
so I imagine though you already were familiar with the bassy stuff because you grew up with
Oh
some of
yes,
that.
uh, yeah, yeah, definitely. Sweets. I listened to a lot of Sweets. I hung out with him a little bit through via Winton when we were doing some bassy material. Winton brought Sweets to the rehearsal because Sweets and Clark were doing a duo trumpet gig at the old Iridium, which is across the street from Lincoln Center. Do you remember that? The
I do
old,
remember the old Iridium from there. Yeah, I don't remember Sweets and Clark. I mean, I know they did some stuff.
yeah.
I think I
So
was out of town at the time, but
yeah, so Sweets would come to some of our rehearsals. I remember just one rehearsal he came to, and he was telling us stories about Ed Lewis, which was a trumpet player with Basie, and
Big
yeah,
Ed
so
Lewis, I think he was.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, the Basie guys, some of those guys didn't get their credit. A lot of times when you play in a lot of big bands, you get buried sometimes, even though the great players like I played with Bill Berry, the trumpet player. I played with him in Mercer's band, and
Huh.
yeah, and Uh, Al Ahrens was studio guy in L.A. This was my L.A. period when Mercer was filling out the band. But yeah, some of those guys, Bill Berry could really play. Like
Oh man, he had a band with Richie Kamuka, and actually it was Jake Hanna's band,
yeah, hmm,
and they all played the Merv Griffin show together.
yeah.
And I was telling you, I used to take my lessons down on the show there, and Richie and Bill would take me to Sardi's, and then they'd take me to Jim and Andy's, and they'd give me wine spritzers because if you drank red wine in a spritzer, it looked like a Coca-Cola,
Oh wow, yeah,
and
yeah.
they'd sneak them to me. I also used to babysit for Bill Berry's son, little Billy,
I know who he is.
and Bill's wife. Oh man, what was her name?
Oh, I'd never met her,
Well,
but I
she was always
remember.
at Jim and Andy's too. She and Bill were tight. And I had the funniest babysitting experiences because I would babysit sometimes for Richie and sometimes for Bill.
Mhm.
And so when I'd babysit for Bill, well, for Richie, for instance, he'd come in, he'd take his wife out, it'd be a Saturday night, and I was at the half note on the other night, so I could miss Saturday
Yeah.
anyway. And Richie would come home, and he'd go into the bed with his wife for a while, and I'd be in the living room, and I'd be listening to records all night, and just hanging out. He had a little daughter named Rami, who was an adorable little 3-year-old, who was a lovely little girl, baby, toddler. And then Richie would come home, and then about 4 in the morning, he'd get out of the bed with his wife. He'd go in there for about an hour, then he'd come out to the living room and start playing Lester Young records.
Hmm.
And we would sing Lester Young solos together in the living room. Richie Kamuka and I would sit there. I was 16, and then another week, um, Richie wouldn't take his wife, but Bill would take Betty Berry. That was her name.
Okay.
Betty was Bill's wife, and I would babysit for Bill. And the same thing would happen. Bill would come back and then play me Duke Ellington records at
Yeah.
like 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those guys were very nice to me. And then now and then they let me sit in.
Me
And
too.
Richie actually took me down to sit in with Roy Eldridge,
Hmm.
and that became a regular part of my life to play with Roy.
Wow. You know, Bill's one of the guys that used to get the hamburgers for the Ellington band, if you know what I mean. Okay, for instance, Bill is the guy that they would send in the restaurant to get the hamburgers for the Ellington
Right,
band
he
back in
told me
the
that.
day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
That's
know,
right. Because
because of the racism in the
right, they'd
Jim
be on the
Crow.
road in the South.
Right.
They
Yeah.
they'd be on the road in the South. That's right. I
Mhm.
remember that story.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, Bill was one of the first guys I played with in the Ellington band in the section.
Yeah, what a yeah. He was a very special, sweet guy, and really could play. Was a
I
beautiful.
loved him.
He had the swing and the bebop thing
Right.
so individually combined, didn't he? He
And
fused those influences. I mean, there was Dizzy, but there was you heard Roy and you heard Buck and you heard
yeah,
all those kind of influences.
yeah.
Joe
Bill
Newman was
Berry,
around New York too. Go ahead
another guy.
at that time,
Yep.
and yeah, he was somebody who was kind of in between those styles as well,
Right. Hmm.
and also with Basie
Yep.
often. And oh man, one morning I heard Sweets lay into his. Joe had a wife named Rigmore,
Hmm.
a Scandinavian woman
Hmm.
who had a very forceful personality, and Sweets wasn't having that.
Right, right, right.
We
Hmm.
were having breakfast in Nice the first time I was in Europe with Chet, and we were all these people were sitting there. I'm sitting at the table with with Sweets and George de Vivier and all of these people whose pictures were on my wall, and Sweet starts to get into it with Rigmore, and he had some very choice things to say.
Right.
I said, never get
Okay.
on this guy's bad side.
Yeah. Sweets. Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know him that well, but yeah, he was one of those guys. Ah, man. Ooh, boy, could he play. He had some good chops too, good lyrical sense, but yeah, he was part of the LA connection that I used to hang out with a little bit. Him and Buster Cooper. Um, yeah. So, but you know what? There's some other guys I wanted to mention that people may not know about. Really great trumpet players. That I wanted to bring up. I wanted to bring up the name Jesse Drakes.
I played with Jesse Drakes
Okay.
at a place called the Alibaba,
Hmm.
which is on 59th Street, right by the bridge on the east side.
Hmm.
And do you remember Mauricio Smith, the
Yes,
flutist?
very well. Yeah, I remember him.
He was there some weekends. They used to alternate, and Jesse Drakes had a group there. Jesse Drakes was on these Lester Young records. People might know him from that.
Yes, that's what.
He made a
Hmm.
few records with that band, and Junior Mance was the pianist on some of those too.
Hmm.
But they were all young at the time. But anyway, Jesse, I won't go on and on with that. But I used to go, and Brooks Kerr and I, the pianist Brooks Kerr, who
Yeah,
died a few years ago,
I knew Brooks
very
very well.
yeah, he was a good friend, and Brooks and I would go, and we were when we were 16, 17 years old, go on Saturday night. Jesse would let us play the whole night with him. He would like Brooks would play some tunes because he had a pianist, but he let him play, and he let me play the whole night with him. And he was
Yeah,
a very nice person, man. And uh, I wouldn't say he
you
was a great trumpet player,
Mhm.
but he had the feeling. He had
Musical.
he was very musical, and he wasn't a virtuoso. That's what I mean to say. Like some of those cats, but but he had grown a lot since his days with Press too.
Yeah, yeah. I remember Benny Powell introduced me to Jesse Drake's up in 59th Street in Columbus Circle. Or he didn't introduce me to him. We were walking. He says, "There goes Jesse Drake's," and he told me Jesse he had a process and all. This was like in the 80 oh, around 85, 86. He was still around.
That's funny. You knew him in '86, and I knew him in '68.
Oh, yeah, and also Brooks Kerr introduced me to another trumpet player, not so well known, named Matty Dice.
Well, you got me there. I don't know him.
Yeah, me too. He did one record with Donald Byrd. It's a two trumpet record. Matty Dice
Really?
and Donald Byrd, and Brooks Kerr is the one that hit me to Matty Dice. And
Yeah,
then
Bruce Kerr knew everything.
yeah, there okay.
Everybody, he was
Yeah.
like,
He knew, oh man, he would introduce me to so much stuff. But we used to hang out a lot and talk a lot. So Brooks Kerr is a cat that needs to be mentioned as far as like the history and just hipping cats to things, you
yeah,
know.
it's such a shame that Brooks didn't live long enough for the internet. I mean,
Yeah,
the
he was
internet was
all that.
around, but he died about 7 or 8 years ago now, and he was a little because he was blind. It took him a little time to get with he lived his life on the telephone.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, his life was really, he was like having a radio show. He would play me things on my answering machine. He'd say, "Man, you got to hear this. It's 1937 with Charlie Christian and Lester Young." Before those things were, well, now they're commonplace. You go and you look that up, and there it is on YouTube.
Oh, that sounds just like Brooks because
But
he hipped everybody to a, and he
uh,
knew Duke pretty well too.
very well. Duke
Mm.
even said, "If you want to know anything about my band, this is in his biography.
Mhm.
Ask Brooks Kerr. He's our encyclopedia."
Right.
And
Yeah,
but
I
Brooks
think I,
would give me so many messages. I had to ask Brooks to please. I lost a gig because somebody said my machine was full,
yeah.
and and in those days that's how the only way you get a gig was
Oh,
somebody
I
leave me.
remember. Mm, yeah.
I'd say, Brooks, you can't. You've been filling up my machine too much. Um,
And,
well, Brooks and I, when we were in high school, I mean, I knew Brooks from Phil Woods' camp.
oh, okay.
And Brooks and a couple other people were the wealthy. Brooks came from a very wealthy family and had a beautiful townhouse with his mother on the East 62nd Street. When you may have known him, he'd moved down to a lower, not low rent, but a lower style of
Yeah.
life because his uncle somehow managed to lose $80 million. How do you
Hmm.
do that?
Right. That's a
But
lot to lose,
I
just to
think
lose.
I think he invested in tanneries in the former Soviet Union right
Hmm.
before Glasnost. I think that's something like that. Anyway, so and then he had stolen the family money. There was a very bad thing with Brooks's family, but anyway, Brooks was uh, quite wealthy, and he had Duke Ellington in 1968 had a
Hmm.
small band at the Rainbow Room in what's that building in Rockefeller Center?
Oh, upstairs.
The Rainbow Grill, yeah, with the roof and
Oh, bar and grill. Yeah, upstairs.
that thing. And Duke's band played. He had a small
Right.
uh, 9-piece group, might have been 9 or 12, that played there 5 nights a week.
Uh-huh.
And Brooks had a permanent table there.
Yeah.
So many nights we went to catch 1 or 2 sets there. Then we go
Mhm.
off and hear Roy Eldridge, go down to the half note, other places. But I was like 4 feet away from Johnny Hodges. We'd be sitting there, and I got to know him a little bit. And we got to know a lot of the cats in the band because they would go and hang out in Brooks's living room because they had a wine cellar in this apartment, and it wasn't just wine; it was also all kinds of alcohol.
Yeah, I got you.
So we'd come in from the half note at 4 o'clock in the morning, and in Brooks's living room would be Paul Gonsalves, Ray Nance, and Sam Woodyard.
Mhm.
For example, That was just one night. Another night with some other cats, but those guys were there, and they would just hang and tell stories, and Brooks and I would just sit there and absorb the stories, and hang with those people. And in fact, one night, we would play after the band left. They knew Brooks so well, they didn't throw us out, and we'd stay. And while they were cleaning up the place, Brooks and I would play duets, and he would sit at Duke's piano, and Duke sometimes let him sit in with the band. He
Mhm.
would he would
Oh,
play a couple tunes with the band. I never did, but I would stand right where Johnny Hodges and Gonzalez and those cats were standing and play my horn, and Brooks and I would play duets just
yeah.
to be in the same air range as that. So one night we're playing, and we're playing Perdido, and in the background I hear a flugelhorn, and it's they all had lockers in the back room there, the band, and somebody's out and playing the flugelhorn, and then he gets closer to the stage, and it's Cat Anderson on flugelhorn.
Wow.
So we played about 40 minutes of Duke Ellington tunes with Cat Anderson on flugelhorn, and he didn't play one high note.
Wow, that's odd. Wow, that sounds like doesn't sound like Cat, but I can see Cat doing that because I heard some. I got Cat's record, a couple of his records where he just plays just melodies in the middle register. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, he was playing like, it was kind of like he was coming out of Clark.
Yeah,
Like the Clark Terry thing was definitely, even the wah, that little thing that Clark
yeah,
had in the sound. He had a little bit of that in it, but he just was blowing and playing lines,
that,
and
that
it was just a wonderful experience to have that. God
wow,
bless Brooks.
that is so wild. I would love to hear. I've never heard Cat on flugelhorn.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know he had one. I mean,
Yeah,
but he did. He came out with the flugelhorn, and and he was just so beautiful. And
yeah.
there's other cats that you mentioned. That's I know you mentioned Jesse Drake's, and
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
what there's a whole list. I'm not gonna go into each one of them, but there's some names here people should really know, especially just musicians in general. There's a trumpet player named Gene Roland.
Gene
Gene,
Roland had
yeah.
a big band,
Mhm.
the band that never was. Right, that was what they
Okay.
called it. And this bird played Stardust. He was known mostly as an arranger.
Wow. Okay.
And he actually, I never played with him, but toward the end of his life, I think he spent a lot of time in the Catskills.
Okay.
And then he had a gig at Gregory's playing piano, and he would play a piano duo. I forget who the bassist was, but I heard him a couple of times. Brooks and I went down to hear Gene Roland.
Oh, I'm not surprised Brooks would know Gene Roland too.
Yeah, and well, it was a club, Gregory's, where
Mhm,
Brooks had a regular gig with Sonny Greer
mhm,
and Russell Procope.
mhm.
They had a trio, and when Procope got sick, he had a heart attack one year. I subbed. I did a month, maybe 6 weeks, where I subbed for Procope and played 5 nights a week with Sonny Greer.
Wow.
No, 3 nights a week with Sonny Greer. The weekend they'd have somebody else, but that was interesting too. But Gene Roland was also playing at that club, and then Lee Konitz also
Yeah.
got a couple nights a week at that club that was Gregory's, which was
Right.
basically a dating bar,
Mm,
what they used to call a meat market,
yeah.
uh, a dating bar on the east 60s,
Wow. Wow.
east 60s, 70s, uptown, and
Wow. Yeah, Gene Roland. I just found out about him about 4 days ago, and he just plays so great. I had to listen to him over and over. But I found him on
really,
the Jimmy Nepper record.
wow, I never heard him play. I mean, he was playing piano when
Mhm.
I heard him. I don't believe he was playing trumpet. If memory serves. The other person that is interesting from that time, who's known mostly as an arranger, and I just talked to Gene Denovi about him, was Johnny Carisi.
Oh yeah, him I know. Yeah, from he's on the Miles Davis stuff, the big band
Right.
stuff.
Well, he wrote Israel, but he was a
Yeah.
trumpet player.
Yes.
But
Yes.
he played very nice. I played a couple of jam sessions with him also in the late 60s, early
Yes.
70s, and he had kind of a unique
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
style, that was, oh, you must know Tony Frisella.
Yeah. Yeah. He's on this list here. Tony Frisella, Bert Collins.
I knew
Uh,
Bert. He was with
yeah.
Konitz's Nonette.
Unsung hero. Unsung hero.
He played a lot with Konitz's Nonette.
Yes, that's what
Lee
I heard.
Konitz had that Nonette, and yeah, I he used to sit in with us with Chet Baker now and then too,
Hmm.
and,
Yeah,
and
he's
he was a beautiful player.
he's a guy. He didn't. He's one of those guys that didn't get much recognition. And anyway, he's one of the guys
Well,
that one
he
of
was
the
a little
unsung.
like you in the sense that he did everything. He could sight read anything. He played a lot of jingles. He
Mhm.
did Broadway shows, and I think he would have gotten more recognition if he just had worked less.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's his partner in crime, Joe Shepley. You
I
remember?
knew Joe Shepley. Joe
Yeah.
Shepley had a big band, and Bill Crow was the bass player.
Mhm.
And I played in Joe Shepley's big band, which never, as far as I know, they never performed. They just rehearsed.
Mhm.
And Joe Shepley, when I was 18 years old, 17, he wrote a chart that featured me,
Right. Okay.
and that was with his big band.
Oh, and Joe wrote the chart.
Joe wrote the chart, and he named it for me and everything. And I was so honored because he was such a great musician,
Yeah.
and he could his solos were imaginative.
Yeah.
Did you get to know Joe?
Very little, very little. I'm I really know him from the Duke Pearson stuff. Um, but I knew him a little bit from the Union, and we didn't know each other very well. But he's one of those cats I admired. He was a little bit gruff, but just a beautiful trumpet player. I
You
didn't
mean
know him
rough as a person, or
as a person.
yeah, I yeah. Well, those guys were tough. They were thick-skinned.
Yeah, yeah, and I can dig it. And you know what? I'm gonna go down this list a little bit. There's Lonnie Hillier, of course.
Yeah,
Uh,
Lily
there's
Morton.
Charles's man, Charles McPherson, Barry Harris, and there's a guy named Don Fagerquist.
Don Fagerquist was a wonderful flugelhorn player. Gene DeNovi was just talking about him. You hear him on a lot of Sinatra records,
Right. Hmm.
and I think those Marty Page things on the
Yeah.
West Coast, right?
Yes, exactly. That's a lot. And then there's Lee Katzman from Chicago.
Okay, him, you got me there. I know the
Okay,
name.
Lee's on that Pepper Adams record called Critics' Choice. And
Uh,
also, Lee Katzman is on one of the last Super Sax records. Like, because I think maybe Connie had already passed. I don't know the story.
uh,
But Lee Katzman was a beautiful, beautiful trumpet player.
really?
Uh, yeah, Lee Katzman. And then there's Clarence Shaw.
No, Gene Shaw, Clarence Shaw,
Gene Shaw. Yeah.
Flamingo with Mingus on Tijuana Moods,
Yeah. Right. Mhm.
and yeah, he did a couple records for Argo under his own name.
Right. Hmm.
And last thing I had heard about him, I know he died a few years ago, but there was a strange clip in Downbeat that said
Hmm.
he was teaching hypnotism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but
Wow. Okay. And then there's, of course, I don't know if I mentioned Don Sleet already.
Don Sleet, I had that record. I think he only did one or two with
Yes.
Lenny McBrown on drums.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Three
did.
Souls,
Yeah. That's called, let me see, Lenny McBrown and the Four Souls. They did two
Four
records.
Souls. Oh,
Yeah. And then Don Sleet had his own record called All Members with Ron Carter and Jimmy Cobb on bass and Wynton Kelly, I think, on piano. And then I just found out about a guy about a year ago from Great Britain named Hank Shaw. Hank Shaw. He reminds me a lot of Dizzy.
Oh,
I don't know if you know of a guy named Shake King.
Jake
Shake.
Dean, yes, was with Joe Harriet,
Yeah,
who was the
exactly.
alto player. And do you know their records are no longer available? I found that out because I wanted to, and there's nothing on YouTube of them either. I was trying to find, because I remember that Joe Harriet and Shake Keane were
Mhm.
playing like Ornette Coleman, Don Cherry in a different way, but the same type of idea of stretching the forms and getting into a different kind of freedom. And I wanted to reinvestigate them. And, I can't find it. And I don't have the records anymore. But they were
I
interesting.
saw some of that stuff on YouTube.
Is it on YouTube? Because maybe I didn't look right.
Yeah, Shake is under a lot of the stuff is under Joe Harris' name. Some of it's under Shake King's name.
Keane, right? Wasn't that?
Yes. And then, like I said, Hank Shaw was out of Great Britain. He's out of Dizzy. And Tony Fusella, we mentioned. And also, there was a lady I used to hang out with in LA named Clara Bryant.
Got me there.
Okay, Clara's a lady trumpet player. She was around in the 50s. She made one record with Fresh Sounds. It was called The Gal with the Horn.
Huh.
It's a really good record. It's a really, really good record. And I knew her personally through Jimmy and Jeannie Cheatham through San Diego. And anyway, she had one record. She passed away within the last 10 years. And then there was my teacher in San Diego. I don't know if you knew this guy named Gary Pack.
No, the name is kind of familiar, but I can't say I know him.
Yeah, he's out of Stan Kenton's big band, but he doesn't play much trumpet anymore. I think he's playing saxophones and flutes, but he was a really good trumpet player. And of course, we talked about Joe Gordon, and there's another trumpet player, Lewis Smith. Lewis Smith
Oh,
out
yeah,
of
the Cannonball.
yeah,
What am I thinking of?
Buckshot.
Yeah, there's a record with Cannonball, right? Buckshot. He had a Buckshot Levine, not
Yeah,
Levine, but
Buckshot the
Levine.
Funk. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
And and Lewis Smith is one of those guys I listen to a lot. He also a lot of people don't know this, but he played with Horace for a minute, live at Newport.
uh-huh.
Lewis Smith with Horace Silver and Lewis Smith. It was Lewis Smith and Junior Cook in the front line.
Right, I remember that. And there's another trumpet player, man, but we didn't mention, but we should, from that Harold Land the Fox record,
Dupree Bolton or
Dupree
oh
Bolton
yeah, that's right. That's another guy. And
and
then
Johnny
there's
Splon.
not Johnny Splon with John Coltrane.
Those are guys I never heard of anymore.
Freeman Lee. There's another guy named Freeman Lee on the Elmo Hope sessions.
You know the biggest mystery, though, to me, and I've been asking about him for years. Maybe you know the answer, but Wilbur Harden.
Oh yeah, I
I
listen to
don't
him
know
a lot.
what happened to him.
I don't either. I know I have him on some Coltrane stuff, some Savoy stuff. He did one record called "The King and I," and I do have that one record.
Is it songs from the
And
King and I?
yeah, all the songs from "The King and I." I think it's on Savoy, but uh, Wilbur Harden. I I know I just know him from the Coltrane stuff in the King of in the King and I.
I
Um,
think he was one of the few cats to really play the flugelhorn
that's
before it was fashionable to play the flugelhorn.
that's all I know him to play.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I thought he was like
Right.
exclusively a flugelhorn player.
Yeah, before I known Art Farmer to deal with flugelhorn.
Art came to that a little later.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And the
I
last
was
guy,
lucky, man. Go ahead.
the last guy I have on the list is somebody we both know. We were talking about is Sam Noto. I think we were
Um,
just talking about him. Yeah,
yeah,
man,
man. Uh,
he's deep. His rhythm concept. He's beautiful chops. And I heard somebody told me that he's a good lead player too.
he's another one, can do everything.
Yeah. Mhm.
Complete trumpet player, and I got to play with him quite a bit in Toronto when I was living up there. He was just wonderful. He did one of our on the real sides too.
Oh,
We got
really? I
a
would
good
like to
interview
see
with
that.
Sam. he's like 92 or so, something like that now, and he's still. I mean, he's sharp as a tack, and
Really?
yeah, and right there, I think he still plays too. And and of course Ira Sullivan was the other one who Sam and Ira always there was something similar in some of the ways they played. Uh,
Yeah.
and there was also a guy in Toronto years ago named Herbie Spanier.
Herbie Spanier.
Herbie Spanier, who
Okay, him I don't.
Paul Blay told me, and Herbie was a great player. He could play bebop wonderfully and everything, but he was one of the first cats to experiment with free jazz.
Okay.
When Ornette and Don Cherry came around, Herbie got right into that and had his own kind of way of doing that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay. Now, see him. I don't. I definitely don't know about him, but I'll be on the lookout.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of great people. Some didn't get very well documented.
Hmm.
Others did. I mean, Tommy Turrentine is
Yeah.
another one that was. He and Lonnie Hillier were very close,
Oh, okay.
and I mean, like inseparably close a lot of the time. And when I was working with Chet, Kahad O'Brien had a club called St. James Infirmary in the early 70s, like 74, 75, around that time. And Tommy would come in to St. James Infirmary, and he didn't have a trumpet. So he and Chet would pass Chet's trumpet back and forth, and I'd solo in between. And so he was, Tommy was often there. And then Lonnie was always close by.
Hmm.
And so sometimes since I was making pretty steady bread and I didn't have any family or anything, I'd invite those guys over to my little apartment in the village. I had lived in a basement on McDougal Street, and I'd have Tommy and Lonnie over there, and I had my little Wurlitzer electric piano, and both of those cats were really good piano players.
That's what I heard. Exactly.
And that was after I played, 4 hours with Chet Baker. After I take those guys to dinner, we go to a little place called Sandolino usually, and on Cornelia Street, I think it was, and then we go down to McDougal Street where I lived,
Mhm.
and hang out there until 11 or noon. And I always supplied the goodies,
Yeah, I got you.
and and we'd stay up and talk music and listen to records, and more than that, even they would start talking to me about tunes and harmony and changes and substitutes and all these things. So these two guys knew so much. I would just sit there and absorb what they were doing and try to, that was I considered like my conservatory training.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that they were. I'm glad we had this conversation because I didn't know that they were really close.
Yeah, they were really close. And I mean, what was funny was that for some reason the liquor store wouldn't sell them. One night I was on my way to the liquor store for some reason, and I mean, to get a little jug for myself or something. And they were outside, and they said, "Man, we're not allowed in anymore because we were a little raucous the last time we were in there. Do you think you could actually go in and and pick up something for us?" I said,
Like teenagers.
"Like teenagers, you know what I mean? Because Tommy could turn into as he was basically a wonderful cat, but he could be a beast when
I know.
overly.
I knew Tommy pretty well. He when I first came to New York, he was hanging out at Barry Harris's cultural center, and down there on 28th and 9th or something like that. It's
Yeah,
anyway. Yeah, but I remember Tommy very, and the more and more he drank, the more raucous he got. Especially he was just drinking beer, but yeah, Tommy, I hung out with him when I first came to New York because I loved his playing and his compositions, and we got to be pretty close actually.
yeah, he was wonderful. He had a short-lived group in the 70s there when I was working with Chet. I was in Tommy's group too, and we did a concert over at Joe Lee Wilson's place called the Ladies Fort.
Yeah, I heard about that place.
Yeah, we played two concerts there, and we played Tommy's tunes, and I was his alto player.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so I got to do that and play with him, and um, he got himself a horn somehow,
Yeah.
and but that's another story. That would take its own show, to explore the complexity of the character of some of these people. I did want to talk about your records. I
Okay.
know that you have one called Zollar Systems,
Mhm.
and another one called It's All Good People, but your newest is called The Ways
Yep.
from 2022.
Yep. The ways in.
Can you talk about those records a little bit before we leave?
Okay, real quick. First of all, my very first record is called "Soaring with Bird." That's under the Naxos label, and I did all compositions of Charlie Parker. It was done on the West Coast, produced
Oh,
by Mr. Ralph Youngheim and Jim Coleman. Okay, so yeah, that's out there. That was my very first record, and my second record
our friend
was
Jim Coleman of the electronics.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's our buddy. Yeah, Jim Coleman, Chet Baker's buddy.
right.
Yeah, and then the second record you mentioned is called the Zollar Systems. That's when I kind of got tired of asking people to record me. So then I just started self-producing my own records. So from here on, starting from my second record on, I start just making my own records, making my own records. Otherwise, no, I started my own label.
Uh-huh.
It's
What's
called
your label called?
it's called JZAZ Records. Meaning
Crazy.
JZ, mean my name and my brother, which is he's helped me with these projects. His name is Alfred Zoller.
Oh, okay.
So JZAZ Records.
Right.
So
Your dad
uh,
was AZ also, right? Your dad's name.
exactly. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. So that record's my first self-produced record is called Zoller Systems, which is a play on words, Solar System.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the tunes I do on there, I write a few tunes on there. My wife writes, and one of the tunes, the leading tune on the record is called "Chicago Prefers," written by Daniel Jackson, who was in Lenny McBrown's Four Souls uh, group. So
Oh,
it's called Zoller Systems, and I've got a few originals on there. And then skipping to "It's All Good People." That's a whole different project. Self-produced, me and my brother, and that's a more of electric. It's a more of electric fusion record. Nothing to do with Straight Ahead at all. It's
mhm.
it's electric Brazilian R&B vocal record. Um, yeah, so there's no bangalang, spangalang, spangalang at all. It's all electric bass, and then so that one, and then uh, now that leads us up to my latest one, which is The Ways In, also self-produced record, with the help of my brother. And the reason we called it The Ways In is because it's dedicated to all my members, all my mentors who helped me find my way into jazz. Meaning that I wanted to get a story narrative to to put this project together. And my friend Nathan East, he's a great bass player. He helped out with the with the concept as far as like a story narrative. So basically, this CD is dedicated to all the people that helped me get into music, like yourself, Bob Mover, Jimmy Cheatham, um, Mercer Ellington. Uh,
Thank
uh,
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's called yeah. So that was the concept. Joe Temperley, who I Winton, people like that who helped me find my way to get my ground in New York. So the ways in is the title. Re, re, reflects on is dedicated to all my mentors, which showed me how to get into the, how to people that helped me get into music, people like Benny Powell, all kinds of people.
Oh, you knew him.
Oh yeah, I knew Benny Powell
Oh,
very
okay.
very well, and all my teachers, all my high school teachers, Robin Crest, Mr. Elmer Ravelli, all the people that helped me get into music. So that's where the title comes from. It's called "The Ways In," dedicated to all my mentors who helped me get
Who's on
find
these
my way.
record? Who's on that record with you?
On "The Ways In" is let me see, Gerald Cannon on bass, David Hazeltine on piano, Willie Jones III on drums, Stefano Dolioni on
Is that the bass clarinetist?
bass clarinet player. Yeah,
Oh, he's great. Yeah, I like it.
he's a beautiful player. He's
Sounds
also
like
this
Charlie Parker on bass clarinet. It's amazing.
right. That's why I wanted to. That's why I wanted. That's why I specifically wanted him for that. And my wife writes some music on there. Nobuko Kiryu, she writes some music and sings on there, and Jennifer Vincent and Mike Rorby, trombone
Uh,
player, produced it. And we have Patience Higgins plays on a guest spot, and a few other people, Chambo Wilson Cornell on Congado. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm missing some people. I'm sorry, but because it was more of my it really involved record actually, and yeah. So, but what happened was with that record, we were supposed to do it before the pandemic, but then the pandemic happened, so then I got put off for a couple of years, and then so that's the concept behind that. And I write one song on there, but my next project, I think I want to hand in writing everything
oh,
actually. So I want to concentrate on writing for my next project.
oh, that sounds great.
Mhm.
Well, that's it's great that you're still so active and
Yeah,
you show no signs of slowing down, which is wonderful.
yeah. I've just got to worry about these chops. But if I do, I'm just maintenance. I just got to deal with some maintenance, and the muscles get older and stuff. But I feel good whenever I have a project. I have to gear myself up. I have to do the right type of maintenance to play and stuff. But I feel pretty good about music and life in general.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
you sure have been a pleasure
Well, thank
to
you.
have this chance to stretch out and talk.
Yeah, man, my pleasure, man.
And,
I'm sure you might have to do some editing. This was a long
well,
conversation.
Jesse, who couldn't be with us today, my producer Jesse Kaiser, is driving right now between the East Coast and though she's going back to where she lives, and she's
She's
midway.
driving.
She's driving. She takes a few days and drives across country. Her family is up
Really?
in, yeah, he's in New England,
Wow.
and
Oh,
so
please give my regards, please.
I will. And so she couldn't be with us today, so I'm handling this. Hopefully, we're being recorded. I pushed the
Yeah.
right button. I'd hate to think we're
Yes.
not. I know we're cool, but
Okay. Yeah,
so
she's so nice. I appreciate her helping us out with this whole project.
oh, thanks. Yeah, I do too. I don't know where I'd be without her, but
I hear you.
she's a big reason for this existing. And you
Yeah,
know,
ask her. Don't forget to ask her. Tell her about she invited me over for some ribs. So let's keep that in mind. I
well,
want
next
to.
time I'm sure she'll be very happy to take you up. I mean, to that you take her up on that offer.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, well, so she couldn't be here today, but I'm going to do the signing off.
Okay.
And, I want to thank James. Thanks so much, man, for being able to do this. And, I'm glad that we got to do it. And it's always a pleasure to hang out with you anyway. And
Yes,
this is yet another way. And give my love to
I sure
Nabucco.
will. Mhm.
And I want to thank everybody for tuning into us today. And if you did enjoy yourself, which I hope you would have, uh, probably you did because you're still here. Um, you could, if you give us a like, it's very helpful. It enables us to keep going and doing this.
Yes.
We're trying to get 1,000 members, and that would really help us a lot. We're up to 800 and something now,
Okay.
so that would be uh, it would be great. The more members we have. Jesse told me how to do this exactly. So if you go to at Bob Mover Jazz Ability, you can
Okay.
find out all the information about how to subscribe if you care to subscribe. It, it's free to go there, and there are many free things, and then there's a membership as well. Jesse's going to put up all that information.
Okay.
But anyway, in the meantime, James, once again, it's been a total pleasure, and thanks everyone for watching, and God bless you all. And we'll see you next time on the Real Side.
After all these years, I'm glad we had a chance to do this. I've been knowing you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, just a total pleasure.